I've been waiting for you.
In this movie, you see this same scene as the 1984 scene, except the scene will unfold in a different way. Except now, because of the visual effects that you can do, and because of the technology that's available, you can tell that story even better.
What was really challenging about it is the Guardian in 1984 is, 20 plus years younger than Arnold himself. We actually scoured the earth to find basically a bodybuilder by the name of Brett. He was the only person who had that 50-inch back that Arnold actually had, but his biceps and quads, everything else was slightly lesser than. And then obviously that served as really our proxy. So when you shoot the fight sequence, Arnold and basically everyone has something to interact with.
It's wonderful. To me, it reminds me sort of the encounter between the T-1000 and Arnold in T2, where they first face each other, and there's something just fun about watching these two things that have the massive Mack trucks going at each other. So it's a human scale fight with punches being thrown, but each one is, like a pile driver. The fight tilts in one direction because, let's face it, our Guardian's been around a little longer and he's starting to show some wear and tear. But yeah, this sort of meeting between two perfectly matched titans is exciting.
What excited me about this Terminator movie was probably the prospect of the recreation of the young Arnold character.
Yannick Sers, who was our visual effects supervisor, and Sherry Hansen, who's our visual effects producer, probably the first thing they ever said to us after they read the script was, the John Connor design is going to be challenging, but the young Arnold in Griffith Park, you're not going to get that until you rip it out of our hands the very last minute when this movie is locked.
It is already difficult enough, I guess, to create a human being digitally. It becomes even more difficult if that human being is like such an iconic figure as Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right from the start, we couldn't leave any stone unturned. So our whole process, how we did digital characters in the past, had to be evaluated and changed or invent new technologies wherever possible to just raise the bar. The observatory sequence of the Griffith Park sequence that we worked on sort of, splits almost into two portions, into two halves. Like the first portion being basically the recreation of the original movie scenes, of the arrival from the young Arnold. And we're basically introducing that young Arnold character traveling back in time. Then the second half and the second part is basically where the storyline deviates a little bit, and that's when young Arnold is basically finding himself being exposed to an opponent, which is basically himself, just at an older age. And that's from there on effectively where we have this sort of face-off between young versus old.
I've been waiting for you.
First, we built the set in New Orleans and shot it practically. Arnold obviously plays the Guardian, but there's the entire process of youthifying, obviously, Guardian to turn our 67-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger into a 50-year-old version of himself. Then we actually scoured the earth to find basically a bodybuilder by the name of Brett, who basically is the only human being on the planet who is almost as big as Arnold was when he was Mr. Universe.
It was all sort of choreographed with a stunt double who sort of acted that out. But what happened throughout the process is we basically had to discard the plate almost entirely. We almost had to say, okay, the lens isn't quite right to be, correct enough and close enough to the original footage, and the framing isn't quite right. So we decided basically to go almost full CG.
The first process is you build the model, which gets you very, very close to where you want to be. But then at the end of it, you get into this uncanny area when you're looking at it to where you're 5% off, things will look right, but it's that glint behind the eyes, it's the way the light interacts with your skin, all of this incredibly finite detail that separates from something that feels actually alive and living and something that just feels dead. Well, the sculpt of his cheekbones feel a little bit better. His face feels just a little bit wider. And I think if we take that down, and so we really feel like, I think it'll accentuate the cheek line more, make the jawline more defined, which is so Arnold.
The review process with our clients started off, at the beginning mostly with us working together with Yannick, basically. And we sort of had regular review sessions with him 2 or 3 times a week where we went through the processes and the steps. With a character like the young Arnold, it was something that took pretty much our entire time from the start of the show when we first started working on this project all the way to the end, where we literally continuously built and refined this young Arnold character. Then further down the line, when it came more to the shot production, we started being more and more exposed to the filmmakers like Alan Taylor Schwarzenegger, on David Ellison and Dana Goldberg. It was a highly creative process, but also a very time-consuming process for us to study and research like what Arnold it was like back then, effectively.
Hi there. Did you know that convicted felon O.J. Simpson was actually considered for the lead role in The Terminator? Director James Cameron rejected the choice at the time because he didn't think the, quote, likable, goofy, kind of innocent guy could pull off a cyborg assassin. If only he knew. Remember to click below to subscribe or on the side for more great content.